All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 6. I'm just going to take you through week 6 of user testing. So before we begin, we just want to go over the agenda. So we want to think about what we've done so far. Then we're going to start talking about the user experience, user testing. We want to iterate based on our feedback, and then we want to think about homework. So when we are thinking about your project, so far you've developed a prototype to highlight the concept or idea behind your solution. You have also considered your brand and how you would like your company to be represented. So we want to think about this idea of user experience and what exactly it means. So when you are building your solution, you want to keep a couple things in mind. And the most important thing to keep in mind throughout this entire process is empathy. And so as you are building and thinking about your solution, are you really meeting your users' needs? Are you really addressing their unmet need? And are you building something that is truly impactful for your user, not specifically for you? So to help us wrap our head around this, we want to think about the UX pyramid. This is the user experience pyramid, and it's a great illustration of what you should be driving towards with your solution. So when we are thinking about products and the most successful solutions, it's going to provide user satisfaction in each of these 6 different levels. We're just going to talk briefly about each of these levels, just to sort of see where you're at, do a little self-reflection piece to see where you're currently at with your solution, where you need to be driving towards. So if we're thinking about the foundational level, and what we really want to do is ensure that our solution is functional. So if we're thinking about the bottom of the pyramid here, we want to make sure that anything that we are building for users is at the very minimum functional. So that means whether you've designed an app, a product, a service, it operates in the way that you've intended it to be. Then you want to think about the reliability of your design or of your solution. So can your user count on your solution to work? So for example, again, if you're using technology in your solution, are there any bugs or glitches that you will need to work out before releasing it to the general public? Then when you think more about that basic level of user experience is really the usability feature. So this is where you sort of get into the middle of that pyramid. So what degree can your user actually use your solution? Does it make sense? And so you want to think about how usable is it for each of your users? Is it really a small target audience, or is it really that broader piece here? What you want to think about when you accomplish all 3 of these levels is that you've really created the foundational level of your solution. So now we want to think more about the high level piece, so the experiences, the people, the activities, and the context of what you've built. So what you want to think about is how convenient your solution is. So it's here that your users are going to really develop that deep connection to your product or your solution, whatever it is. So this is why it needs to be convenient. If it's not convenient for them to use, then they're not going to use it. You need to ask yourself, does it help simplify their life? And is the product or service or app itself a convenient go-to? So if it is convenient and easy to use, then you are well on your way to building a successful venture here. Then you want to think about the pleasurability of your solution. So are people enjoying the fact that they get to use it more and more? You want to find ways to make sure that people like to use your solution, and that way they're going to have it be a regular part of their life. And then finally, to really max out this pyramid and to max out your user experience, you want your users to find the solution to be meaningful. So you want them to feel like they are invested and that they have an emotional connection to what they are buying from you. So when you achieve this, and when you achieve each level of the pyramid in your designs, you are knowing that you have created a very true and meaningful and impactful solution for your users. So as you think about each of those 6 different layers of that pyramid, I want you to reflect on your own solution and ask yourself if you've achieved all the elements in your solution. At the very minimum, I want you to have gotten through the foundational level of your pyramid. So thinking about, is it functional, is it reliable, and is it usable? So thinking about the tasks, the products, and features that your solution has. And if you have determined that it is foundational in what you've created, then I want you to move into that higher level of experience there of that pyramid. When you are working through this with your students, you're going to distribute the user experience pyramid checklist. And this is only the top half here. It does go through all of those different levels, but it has some prompting questions that they can use. And so a great way to do this is to have them use a one-colored pencil crayon, so maybe a red pencil crayon to start. And as they go through the checklist, think about all of these key questions. So you can see that each of them have, each of the levels have their own key questions or their key prompts. And if they've achieved that, yet, or they feel they've achieved that, then they can check it off. This again helps them as they go through the next piece of iteration and what they need to improve on, and to be able to see where those differences are. Then we want to think back on your project. So what we want to do is, you've now developed this prototype, and it's important that we test it with, ideally, users. And so when we are testing it with users, you may not be able to test it with the user that you have determined, depending on who you sort of have around you in the next week or so. But you want to test it with somebody regardless. So whether it's a friend, a family member, a colleague, what have you, you want to make sure that you are getting your prototype in the hands of somebody that can give you some real rich feedback. One of the most important pieces to do when testing is to provide context. So people need to know what it is that you are trying to solve with this prototype, with your solution. What is the problem that the user was facing, and what was that how might we question? Make sure you're telling your users you're testing the prototype and not them. They want to make sure that they are not doing things or feeling like they're doing things incorrectly, but really it's about testing the prototype. You want to ask the user to talk out loud. So this is a great way for you to sort of jot down any key pieces of information. If they're sort of saying things like, I'm not sure how this works, or I don't know what to do next, or I don't know what this piece is for, that's some very key insights that you want to jot down. You also don't want to guide the user, so you want to listen and watch what they say and do. So again, if they are interacting with a product and they keep going to one piece of the product that doesn't really match anything, you want to make note of that to show, this is not something that they have worked with. And then you also want to test with multiple users. You want to get people from different perspectives to really interact with your solution to get some really great, rich, varied feedback. You are going to have a user testing handout that's going to be pushed out as an editable doc. And so again, you want to make sure you're providing context. When you are doing that, after you do that and your user is interacting with your prototype, you want to watch and listen to what they are doing. You want to think about what they are asking, what they are doing, and what they are feeling, and jot notes here in this section. Then you want to think about any follow-up questions. So when they have completed the testing, you want to say something like, thank you very much for your feedback. Were there any parts that didn't make sense to you? Do you have any suggestions for how I can make this solution better, solve the problem? So those are those two key pieces, and you will be submitting this for us to see how you came up with your user testing feedback. We said here testing with at least one user. Hopefully you have the opportunity to test with two. If that's the case, then you can just make a copy of this template and fill it in for the second user. When you're working through with students, we have this user testing script. So we've provided a script where they can think about what the name of their prototype is, providing a little bit of context, and then again with those same key questions. So watching and listening, follow-up questions. If they have something like an app prototype or some sort of web-based prototype, what is the user interface feedback? So it's the feedback on that. And what are some of those action items about changes that they need to make? With students, we want to have them test with at least 3 to 4 users to make sure that they are really getting some rich and varied feedback. So thinking back to your project here, when we get feedback from our users, themes start to emerge when multiple users are saying or doing the same thing. Now this might be a little bit different depending on how many you have the opportunity to connect with, but you want to think about what your users are saying and some of those key themes that keep cropping up. So you want to think about what you're going to keep and what you also must change first. And so you're going to be given this document as well. And there's 4 key questions about the feedback that you're getting. So what will you keep about your solution or your prototype? What must you change? What should you consider changing? And what questions do you still have? So for example, you may get feedback, some positive feedback, and things like the interface. So you want to keep a simple interface. You want to keep the ability to control the camera in the drone. You want to keep the zoom feature, and you want to keep the user profile section with past flights, recent sightings of animals, etc. When you're thinking about what must you change, you want to add a back button on the payment screen. You want to move the logo or home button to the top left corner rather than the right. You might want to include a store or a share button on the camera screen. You may also find that you get some outliers in what the feedback is. So they may provide you feedback unlike other feedback that others have said, and they may highlight some interesting ideas, but what you want to do is spend time focusing on those key ideas that you get from most of the users rather than focusing on that one or two key piece of feedback. So for example, here when we look at the what should you consider changing, one person said we should be able to connect with others on the app. Since that was a bit of an outlier, we crossed it out and didn't think it was important, but we wanted to add in the ability to share images on social media. And then any questions that we still had, do users really need another way to connect with other people on the app, or is it better to simply share the photos on existing social media? Do users want to be able to get notifications at specific locations or animals? So thinking about what the key themes are that you get in your feedback, what changes you're going to make, what must you keep, things that you might consider changing later on down the road, and any questions that you may still have. When you're working with students, they are going to iterate based on their feedback. And so this is where they come back to their pyramid checklist in this sense. So they will have the opportunity to go back, revisit. So if they checked everything off in red pencil crayon initially, they may go back and check out all those changes with the green pencil crayon. And again, that's a great piece for assessment where you can see the changes that they have made and how they've taken their ideas to that next level. So when we are thinking about this in the app, the middle school course, it's module 9, lessons 2 to 3. And then the high school course, it's module 9, lessons 2 to 4, actually not 2 to 3. So when we're thinking about homework, we want to think about the tasks that you need to add to your Scrum board to help you manage your project. So again, remember, it's all about that project management piece. So now that you've developed your prototype and you've tested your prototype, and you're going to be testing your prototype, what are those key pieces that you need to move into that Scrum board there? And then you want to test your prototype with at least one user using that handout to get feedback. And then you want to complete the feedback themes handout and make any necessary changes to what your prototype is. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing what you come up with.